Hi, I'm Ray, back again at long last. I know it's been a long time. Sorry for the delay. Coming up to Halloween, in fact Halloween tonight. And I have another ghost story for you. Now, I say ghost story, this one's weird. This happened to a friend of mine, Karen, many years ago. She'd been to a hotel, it was quite a drive away, about 100 miles. A kind of reunion, a school reunion thing. She'd been to this hotel and she was on her way home. It was a dreadful night. It was about 11 o'clock, she reckoned. Dreadful night, lashing rain, howling wind. She drove through this village. Of course, in the days of no sat-nav, nothing like that, but she had her map, instructions written out on the dashboard, left at the A so-and-so, keep going, right at the roundabout and all this. She didn't get lost, but she broke down. A country lane, pitch dark, pouring rain, howling wind, she broke down. Just managed to pull into a driveway or a track that led to a house. Fortunately, the house, the lights were on. The engine had just packed up, it wouldn't start, nothing would happen at all. She had no choice but to go to the house. She didn't have a jacket, she didn't have a coat, she didn't have a rain mac, nothing, because she didn't expect to be breaking down in the middle of nowhere and have to walk a good, 50 yards or more, she said, to the house. She knocked on the door, and this man, huge man, she said, big man, big black shock of hair, opened the door. He looked down her and he's looking her up and down. And she said, oh, I've broken down. Could I use your telephone to call for help? And he didn't answer. He just looked her up and down. He's grinning. And she didn't like that at all. She felt very uncomfortable because she's still out in the rain. An older man came up. He said, who's that, John? And he pushed the younger one aside. And he said, what are you doing out there? She said, I've broken down. My car's broken. Can I use your phone? He said, we haven't got a phone. He said, we haven't got a phone. We haven't had a phone for years. It got cut off. She said, oh, I don't know what to do. My car, I don't know what to do. He said, well, you better come in. He led her through a dimly lit hallway right to the back room. The younger man followed her. She could feel him right behind her, looking at her, gazing at her. She stood in front of the coal fire in this back room, which she assumed was the dining room. There was a table, dirty cups, plates, dishes all over the table. The house was a complete mess. All around the floor there was rubbish, there was a mess, there was a sofa with old newspapers on, a dog by the fire. He just opened one eye, looked at her and growled. She didn't like it at all, but what could she do? No mobile phone in those days. They didn't have a phone. She couldn't walk back. The village she'd last driven through was a good 2 miles away. She couldn't walk back in the rain and the wind for 2 miles. All she had on, as I said, was this short skirt, skimpy top. This young man was looking her up and down and grinning all the time. The older chap said, you better stay the night. You've got no choice. Get help tomorrow. We're going to the village and get help tomorrow. She said, but do you have a car? Oh, no, I haven't got a car. She looked round and she thought, well, they haven't even got a television. They've got nothing. The house was just a tip. She sat on the sofa. Her clothes were dripping wet from where she'd walked up only 50 yards, but in the lashing rain from her car to the house. She was soaked. The old chap said, you better get out of those wet clothes. The young man's face lit up even more and he's grinning. She said, no, I'll sit by the fire. I'll dry by the fire. Don't worry about that. Last thing she said to me, last thing I wanted to do was take my clothes off. The older man introduced himself. He said, I'm Jack Dillon and this is my son John. And she said, do you live here alone? And he said, oh yes, just the two of us. He said, my wife died many years ago. And she started chatting and she was saying, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. She realised when she'd walked in that the house hadn't got a woman's touch. Looking round, Jack said to his son, go and make the girl some tea. She looks like she could do with a hot cup of tea. So the younger chap went off. She felt a little easier as the old man said, look, make yourself at home and don't worry, we'll sort your car out in the morning. Everything will be fine. His son, John, brought in a mug of tea, passed it to her. The cup was filthy and she couldn't drink it. She just said thank you and put it on the table by the sofa. She couldn't drink it. The cup was absolutely disgusting, as were all the plates and dishes left on the dining room table. She thought the best thing she could do is just sit there by the fire all night and wait for the morning, then sort her car out. She looked at the older man and said, "Shame about my car, it's not very old, it's never broken down before." She was trying to make conversation, trying to lighten things a little bit and not show her anxiety. He said, "I don't like cars, that's what killed my wife. So I bought her a vintage car for her birthday, and she turned it over, rolled it over, lost control round a bend, died." And she said, "I'm so sorry to hear that." He said, "I just don't like cars, that's why we haven't got a car." She felt sorry for him. She was a bit wary of the son, but she felt sorry for the older man because he was obviously devastated. He lost his wife. He's still in the house. It all gone to pot. The whole place had just gone to pieces, and he obviously wasn't coping. "Go and get the girl a blanket," he said to his son. "Go and get her a blanket. It's a cold night." He stoked the fire up, put some more coal on it. The son came back with this blanket, which was filthy. But what choice did she have? She was cold, wet, shivering. At least he got the fire going properly. She put the blanket over her, and they both went upstairs, said goodnight, went upstairs. She settled on the sofa. She didn't want to go to sleep. She knew she wasn't going to sleep. The dog kept looking at her, the flames flickering around the room. She just didn't feel at all comfortable. She just wanted to be at home, and she couldn't understand how this whole thing had happened. After a lovely evening, her car had broken down. Of all the places to break down, she's thinking about all this. She reckons she eventually sort of dozed off a little bit, and she was woken by a noise. She heard something upstairs because she sat up. Someone's coming down the stairs. She could hear someone, the stairs creaking. So she went back down onto the sofa, pretended to be asleep. Then young John, the big lad, came into the room and stared at her. She could see him, just half opened her eyes. She could see him in the reflection of the fire, the flames flickering. She looked up at him, and he was grinning, and he stroked her hair away from her forehead. She just froze. She said she just froze, pretended to sleep. She wanted to scream out, but she just pretended to sleep. He turned, put some more coal on the fire, and left the room. She said she was terrified, absolutely terrified. She on the one hand, she thought, well, he's harmless. But on the other hand, the way he kept grinning at her, looking at her legs, looking at her top, her wet, it's only a skimpy top, which was very wet, almost see-through, and he kept looking and staring and grinning. He eventually went off, and she said it must have been a couple of hours that passed, and he came back. And again, she pretended to sleep. He came back, he put some more coal on the fire, stroked her hair again, touched her shoulder. She was on her side on the sofa, touched her shoulder, and she was about to leap up when he stood upright again and left the room. She didn't go back to sleep this time. She stayed wide awake for the rest of the night. She realised that it was no wonder that John was looking at her. She was 20 years old. She was attractive, long blonde hair. She was a very attractive young lady. And he was obviously a man in his early 40s, late 30s possibly. And he obviously was looking at her in a certain light. Living with his father as he did, he probably didn't have a social life, probably never had a girlfriend. So of course he was fascinated by this beautiful young woman that was asleep on the sofa. She did realise that, but that aside, it was still terrifying. Eventually, sunlight came in through the window. She must have gone to sleep because she woke and suddenly there's daylight. The relief, she said, that she felt, the relief to see the sun streaming in through the window was immense. She couldn't believe it. She leapt off the sofa. She heard them coming downstairs, two lots of bang, bang, bang and creaking. The old man came in. "Breakfast," he said. "I'll make you some breakfast." No, she said, "No, that's fine. I don't want breakfast. I must get to the village. I've got to get the car fixed." "Don't worry," he said, "don't worry. Your car has been fixed." She sort of looked at him and looked at the son, who was grinning again. John did it, he said. John fixed your car in the night. And John held out her car keys. Now, her car keys had been in her handbag. She had a little handbag with her. So he'd been into her handbag. But that didn't matter. The point was, her car was fixed, or so he said. She grabbed her handbag, thanked them for everything they'd done. She hurried to the front door, eager to get out, eager to get home and have a shower and get into some clean clothes. The old man followed her outside. It was a lovely day. The rain had stopped. It was a beautiful day, no wind. The sun was shining. She felt the heat of the sun on her back. Made her feel really good after what had been a night of terror, really. The old man said, when you're next passing, will you come and see us? And she said, yes, okay, yes, I will do. And she meant it. He said, only the thing is, you remind me of my wife. And he said, that's why John has taken such a shine to you. You obviously remind him of his mother when she was younger. And she felt really sorry for them both at that point. She said, yes, I will, I promise, I'll come and see you. She walked down to her car, they both waved, she waved, she got into her car. It started, first time, much to her relief, and she drove home. It was a few weeks later. She had to go up to see one of her friends that had been at the hotel, this reunion. And she baked, she was always into cooking, she was baking pies and things. She made this big pie. She thought, I'll make that and I'll drop in and I'll give that to John and Jack. And they can at least have one proper meal rather than whatever it was they were living at. Neither of them could cook, she reckoned, and with the state of the place, they just weren't coping. She made this big pie, put it in the back of the car and drove up there, found the place, this time drove up the lane, parked outside the house. As she got out, another sunny day, she thought it looked different, although she'd only seen it in the dark before, and the wind and the rain. But she thought it looked a lot tidier. The front door was, before, paint was cracking and peeling off. It had all been decorated, it looked lovely. She rang the bell, and this chap opened it, and she said, I'm looking for Jack Dillon and his son John. And this chap said, I'm Jack, yes, I'm Jack Dillon. As he said that, this boy, about 10 years old, came up to stand beside him. And he said, this is my son, John. And she said, sorry, I must have got the wrong house. And she looked, no, this is the right house. I'm looking for older people, an older Jack Dillon and his son, early 40s, late 30s. As she said that, a young woman came up the hallway and stood behind the two lads. And she said, hello, how can we help you? Karen just looked at the three of them and she said, I'm sorry, I don't know how to explain. It must have been a dream. I must have had a dream. I dreamt about Jack, his son John, this house. I had a vivid dream all about this house. Jack turned to his wife and he said, oh, this is one for you. She's into dreams, he said, looking back at Karen. She loves dreams. She analyses dreams. Come in, come and have a cup of tea. Tell us all about it. Karen knew that she'd not been dreaming as she followed them down the hallway into the dining room. There was the coal fire. There was the table. There was the sofa. Everywhere was tidy, like a show house, spotlessly clean. She recognised Jack and young John. She could see the similarity. They were the same people, but 20 years younger, at least 20 years younger. She looked at his wife and she saw the resemblance between the wife and herself. That's what the old man had said. You remind me of my wife. You remind John of his mother. But she couldn't understand. She'd never met these people before. It couldn't have been a dream. It was real. She'd stayed the night there. She started talking to them. They made her a cup of tea. She sat down. They made her very welcome. And the wife, Angela, her name, she was talking about dreams and how memories can be stirred and all this. But Karen said, but there are no memories. When I first visited this house a few weeks ago, I had no memories. I didn't know you. I didn't know of you. I didn't know Jack. I didn't know John. I'd never been here before. I'd never been to the area before. I'd just go into a hotel to meet some friends. Angela came out with various answers. Oh, well, it'll be this and it'll be that, and past lives. And Karen just sat there sort of nodding and smiling, thinking, past lives? I've not been here in a past life. Is there such a thing as a past life? She enjoyed the tea. She was totally confused. She just came across as, yeah, it was a dream, that's all it was. Funny how these things happen. As she left, she walked out. She didn't give them the pie. That was still on the back seat of her car. She thought, well, I can't offer them a pie because they look very hungry and thin, and they need a good meal, because they all looked extremely well fed and healthy. But as she walked out, Jack followed. John and Angela were at the door and they waved. And he said, dreams are funny, aren't they? It's obviously come from some memory you have in the past of this area, perhaps when you were a child. And she just said, yeah, that must be it, that must be it. As she opened her car door, she looked around and she said, do you have a car? Oh yes, got a car, he said. Yes, it's round the back. Got a car. Is it a vintage car? She said. And he stared at her. He looked shocked. He said, no, it's not a vintage car. No, it's only a couple of years old. And he said, why? Why do you ask? She said, oh, no reason. I just wondered. It was something to do with the dream that I'd had. And he said, well, that is really strange. That is uncanny. She said, why? Well, what's happened? He said, it's my wife's birthday next week on Halloween. It's her birthday. I'm getting her a vintage car for her birthday.